It's always about a value exchange versus how you can approach someone as you're giving them an opportunity.
Welcome. You're listening to the Apartment Investing Show. This is where you'll learn how to start or scale your apartment investing career. Your host, Adam Adams, believes in personal development, physically, financially, and mentally. Adam and his guests will show you how to create residual income by investing in apartment communities. Now, here's your host, Adam AAA Adams.
Welcome back to the Creative Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Adam AAA Adams. And I'm with Sterling White, and he's got a podcast. We'll tell you a little bit about the podcast. Also, if you would like to go back in time, a little over 160 episodes ago, wow, Sterling was on the show on episode 148. That's 148. Go and search for it. You'll see that it's called From Single Family to Multifamily. So that's his story on how he jumped from doing single family real estate and thinking outside the box and getting into larger multifamily. He has an awesome story. His company is Sonder Investment Group. Sonder, I asked him, what does that mean? And he's letting me know that really each human being out there has his or her own life, their own story, their own path, their own journey, and something that you can learn from them. And that's really what we're talking about today. Is we're on these other podcasts, or when we are a podcast host, we're bringing in people, we're bringing in their story. And if you ever decide to be your own podcast host, and I suggest you do, because it's something that I've noticed you get a lot of value out of. But with Sonder Investment Group, each human has their own story, their own life, and doesn't matter where they come from, we can learn something from everyone. I'm going to do that with the podcast today. We've already had him on the show. Again, that's episode 148. You're going to look for that right after this episode. You're just going to hop off this episode before you listen to a different episode or a different podcast. You're going to scroll through, listen to 148, get the rest of Sterling White's story. He's not only been on the podcast, but he's also been on my stage. Everybody knows that I have had thousands of people in a room, and Sterling White was at the Finding Deals Summit, I believe, of 2019, April.
Yes. All the years are just
And he crushed it. I mean, we had some of the best speakers on the planet. And if you ever get an opportunity to meet Sterling in person, you should. He's got a phenomenal personality, very helpful, very giving, very loving, very open, and very fun as well. And then I wanted to also say that if you ever have a chance to come to any of our events, the Raising Money Summit, whatever we're hosting, we do our absolute best to always give you true value, so that whatever a ticket costs, whatever the time and a hotel may cost you, we're going to give you 10x value easily to be there. And there's a lot of really good networking. So you should plan to come. But I always wanted to bring Sterling White on. He's been able to accomplish a few things. So you'll hear some of his story, but I'm going to start here. Sterling, what is your superpower? What's your absolute superpower? What do you do that is unique to you, and not very many people are doing it the way you do it?
Gosh, I would just say the whatever it takes mentality. And by whatever it takes is just willing to get kicked in the face. So on the acquisition side, if an owner will hang up on me, I do an outbound call to them, look to acquire their property. I will then show up to their office the next day and say, hey, by the way, I know you hung up on me the other day. However, I did just want to mention to you, I'm in the area and would love to just get some FaceTime to show you my level of seriousness. So not many people are willing to do that after they've done the outbound call, got hung up on, to then show up to that person's office and get a face-to-face. So I believe that's something that I do that's out of the ordinary, that has really helped me achieve the success that I've had, and there's still plenty much more to go.
I love it. Now, on your podcast, tell the audience a tiny bit about that podcast so that they know how to find it, what it's all about, and then I have a couple of questions for you.
All right. So the podcast is the real estate experience with myself, and I bring on other high achievers that are in the industry, investors, also entrepreneurs. Adam was a recent guest. He'll be on there. Show is set to air here soon. Had GC Grant Cardone that was on there as well, dropping absolute bombs. But it really just goes into the beliefs, the mindset, and also some tactical ways to find deals in today's market.
And I know you spend around 50% of what you're pulling out of your guest is the mindset around it, and the other half is trying to really learn a little bit about the tact, what they're doing, the mechanics around real estate investing. Why don't you just focus on the mechanics of real estate investing? Why would you focus half of the podcast on the mindset?
I believe I should focus even more on the mindset now that I'm thinking about it, maybe 85 to 90%. So you struck a nerve a little bit, for lack of a better word, trying to think of that one. But in terms of, I'm more of a firm believer that someone's beliefs, because for the longest time, I had the limiting belief that only the wealthy could invest in real estate. And then also you needed a large amount of cash to get started as well. My very first deal at the age of 23 had negative funds in my bank account, overwithdrew it, just not being financially literate. And then when you would pull my credit score, it wouldn't even register. But I was still able to get my foot in the door by using someone else's money. And similar story to you, Adam, where you mentioned your very first deal was you didn't have any money. You were in college as well.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And so are you thinking about changing that up into the podcast? You said you really think that the mindset around doing real estate is extremely important, 85 to 90%. And are you considering maybe talking more about the mindset than the mechanics on the podcast, or?
I would say so, yes.
Got it.
Dig a little bit more deeper and uncover why did you do that. And one of the things that you mentioned on the podcast it's just simple little tweaks. And myself, even still this day, I have limiting beliefs that I want to unlock. But you alluded to being a problem solver, looking at it as how I can do that versus what was the other thing that you mentioned versus?
Yeah, I can't.
Yes.
Versus how can I? Yeah.
Exactly. It's beliefs. And if you have that, you'll always figure out a way. I'm just getting super jazzed up right now.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think if your question that you're asking is, why is this so difficult? Why can't I do this? You're just asking the wrong question. And that's just what comes to most people's minds, right? They will say, why can't I do this? And because of that, they're going to start thinking of, the reason why I can't do this or haven't been able to do this is because I'm young, is because I don't have enough money, is because I don't have the connections yet, or whatever. So if you switch the question that you're asking, you're going to answer a different question. So why can't I do this? You're going to prove yourself that you can't. How can I? You're going to find a way to do it. I love that. Okay, so one of the things that was interesting, and I think that the listener to go and search right now for the Real Estate Experience podcast, because these episodes are coming out around the same time. So when this episode's coming out, you ought to just go and search for the Real Estate Experience podcast, because you'll have a good laugh. The reason why you're going to have a good laugh is because there's something called the fire round. Now, y'all know that I generally have the final 5 on this podcast. The final 5 are: what's your most creative deal? What's a book you recommend? Where were you 5 years ago? Where will you be 5 years from now? How do you give back? So these are the 5 questions that I like to ask every guest. Now, Sterling has 2 questions that he asks every guest, and you're going to hop onto that podcast and you're going to realize that I was prepared for one of the questions and then left my notes at home.
He was stumped.
I was stumped, which you'll hop on to the Real Estate Experience podcast with Sterling White, and you'll just search for my episode right now, and you'll actually be able to see that. Now, as we're going into this fire round, I wanted to bring up those 2 questions for you, for the audience. What are the 2 questions that you ask on your fire round?
So the first one for you, the person who's listening, whether you're in the shower, shaving your head and brushing your teeth at the same time, or driving on the road, is what is one absurd or just out of the ordinary habit that you love to do? So that's the first one. And then the second, got to pull up my notes here. What is a common myth about real estate that you can debunk?
Okay, so here's the thing. Joe Fairless came on the podcast. And when he came on the podcast, I in turn said, Joe, what's the best real estate investing advice ever? Because that's the question that he asks on his podcast, and no one ever really gets an opportunity to hear it from him. So anyway, what he said on there, you'll have to go and listen to it. No, I'll tell you. He said, if you control the money, you control the deal, which is something that I try to help my clients do, is to really attract capital, to be the influencer, to attract capital so that you can control the money so you can get the deals whenever you want. I loved that. I thought I got a lot of value out of that, and almost nobody would have known what Joe Fairless's best advice was on his own podcast because he never says it. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring the fire round up. You've got these two questions that you ask every guest. So I want to get your answers to the absurd habit that you have. And then I want to talk about the common myth that you see in real estate.
Okay, so one absurd habit that I have is bird watching. Yes, bird watching, I truly do enjoy it. And it's the biggest thing that I was able to get from college, actually. I ended up dropping out on a 4-year degree in my 5th year to focus full-time on business. But through that is I took this class that was an elective class, and I was very questionable about it. It was called ornithology. And ornithology is the study of birds. And it was an 8 a.m. class. In college, I did not enjoy, many college students don't enjoy the 8 a.m. class, but I actually I got up early to go to this because it was just a whole nother thing that opened with their flight patterns, their different calls, their feathers. It was so very interesting. So that's one just out of the ordinary habit. And then one common myth is that you need a lot of money to get started is one common myth that I have as well.
Okay, so the bird habit, that's interesting. Always watching the birds, learning about their flight patterns and their calls. Now, as far as this common myth goes, let's dive into this a little bit more. I think it's obvious that there needs to be money to buy things that cost money. So if you don't have to have money to buy something that's millions of dollars, how do you do it?
Yeah, you can leverage other people's cash, essentially, and be of value. So that very first deal that I acquired at the age of 23 years old with no money out of pocket, I was able to partner up with someone who, at that time, I didn't have the cash or the credit to be able to buy it, but I looked at how can I solve this problem versus why can't I? And I found someone on the other side who had the cash and also the credit. You don't necessarily need the credit. It helps. But they didn't have the time to find a deal. So I'm using my hands for those of you who are not able to look at video, but they want to complement their weaknesses with my strengths and my strengths with their weaknesses. So I brought them that very first deal. They were looking to go from apartments to single family, and that was the problem I brought to them. It was in a working class setting, bought the house for $25,000. He funded the purchase and then also funded the renovations. What I brought to the table, and you couldn't buy that house for $25 now, it's gone up. And
it's like $26,000 now.
Oh gosh, no. And so through that is instead of taking a simple wholesale fee, I look long-term and retain equity in the deal. But what I brought to the table on top of just finding it was I was managing the transaction with the title company, the contractors, did the leasing, did property management. And I learned so much through that process. But that just goes to everyone who's on here. It's always about a value exchange versus how you can have the person, but approach someone is you're giving them an opportunity. It's just a small tweak in terms of mindset.
Yeah. And I think that's important for the listener to really internalize and not just pass through what you just said. When we're talking about how we are offering an opportunity, we hear it for the first time, and generally we'll be like, oh, yeah, of course we're offering an opportunity. He's right. But we still don't actually believe it. we still get to the place where we're talking to that past investor, and then what we say to them is, oh man, I need the money. I won't be able to close without the money. I'm screwed if I don't, work with you. And how do I prove to myself? How do I prove to you? How do I prove myself to you that I'm worth it to use your money? And I just think that's the wrong way to be thinking. So just to kind of dive in a little bit on what Sterling just said, when we're offering an opportunity, we have to feel extremely confident that what we have is amazing, and a lot of people would be grateful to have an opportunity like that, to have somebody to be able to manage this for them, to be able to have somebody go to the title company for them, and they still make money in at the same time. Because there's a lot of people that have a lot of money ready to go, but they don't have any time. And if you really think about that, if you really think about like the problem that you would have if you needed to invest a couple of $100,000 or $25,000, if you had to invest it, if it was doing nothing, if it was being wasted, if it was just sitting there, and you were just way too busy that you couldn't even start to make money on that money, the whole reason that you got that money because you had the intention of letting your money then go to work for you, but you're too busy to be able to do it. And then someone like Sterling comes up and says, hey, I've got an opportunity that you could be able to make some money and I'll do all the work. That person is going to be like, heck yeah, I'm in, here's the 25. Thank you. Thank you. They're going to thank you when they give you their money. And once you really start to believe that and feel that way and understand it and internalize it, what is going to happen is when you approach that same investor, when you go to that investor and you offer the next opportunity, you're going to feel confident that, hey, if you don't want this, somebody else is going to want this because this is incredible. So definitely wanted to really touch on that. Now, Sterling, I want to go into our final 5, which again, most creative deal you've done, a book you recommend, where were you 5 years ago, where will you be 5 years from now? And how do people, how do you give back? But before that, I was thinking to myself, Joe's question of just what is your best advice ever is actually pretty interesting. I like the common myth and I like the absurd habit as well. I like my questions, but let's try something new on our podcast. Since we've brought it up already, there's probably a couple listeners who are thinking to themselves, yeah, Adam brought up what the best advice ever. Are they just going to skim through it and not even give their best advice? So Sterling, as somebody who did single family for a long time, was able to get involved into some deals without having to use money in the beginning and scaled up to multifamily. And now you have Sonder Investment Group. What's your best advice for aspiring real estate investors?
Okay. I just had and I blanked out on it. I had 2 really good ones. First one is that investing in yourself because you are a sure bet. And the second is everything in life is sales. That was an absolute game changer when I heard that. And when I mean everything in life is sales is that even when you're buying deals that you have to sell the person, whether that's the broker and why you would be the right person to buy the deal, or even let's say it's a relationship that the woman or the man that you're looking to have a relationship with, you have to sell them on why you would be a good fit. Or my 7-year-old daughter, that's where actually all my hair went. In case anybody was wondering, she's got hair all the way down her back like Tarzan. And so through that, I have to sell her on why it's good to practice gymnastics moves so she can improve. So that, and then also investing in yourself, because I believe investing in yourself is more worthwhile than actually investing in real estate, because you invest in yourself, that's a sure bet, and you'll always have those skills. That way you can be even more valuable to the marketplace, which in essence is you bring more value, and then you'll be able to reciprocate, if that's the best word, to earn more money.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that because as we're recording this, it's the end of a year. As we're recording this, it's the very end of the year. And this year I passively invested in 3 different deals, and, it's a significant capital to go into one deal. Who did 3 of them. And at the same time, I hired a few coaches this year. And it's coming to that time where, the coaches' fees are coming to an end, and I know that I need to work with them again. And so I'm budgeting what I'm going to put in just my own mentors, my own coaches. And I know I coach people, I mentor them, I help others as well, but doesn't mean that I don't stop learning and growing myself, right? So I love what you said. Investing in yourself can sometimes even be more of a return than investing in real estate, because I'm budgeting another $72,000 for me to be in a couple of different masterminds and then work with a couple different coaches for next year. And it's a lot of money, and I'm thinking, like, where is it going to come from? How am I going to get it? And so I just want to, at least, I think it's important to show that those of us who you're following, you're listening to our podcasts, you should know that we really truly believe in growth. We really truly believe that if I can become better, if I can have a better mindset around this, if I can learn a couple tips and tricks and strategies, just small little slivers, that 72 grand that I'll be spending in the next year should result in a much higher ROI than however much I'm spending. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And I want to mention one thing quickly too, is this was another thought and limiting belief I had. I thought after high school or even furthering my education in college that once that was over, that was done. But I realized that it is ever evolving as just me personally to further just grow in, because there's so many, I'm trying to think what philosopher said it, maybe Socrates, that says the thing I know is I can't know everything, something along those lines, that there's just so much out there to really know about the industry. Everything's always changing. There's artificial intelligence that can now be implemented in business, just so much.
Yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. So let's do this. Let's take just a quick break, let our sponsor speak, and then we'll hop into the final 5.
This episode was made possible by Adam's Inner Circle program. This exclusive group is a collection of industry leaders, influencers, passive investors, and strong operators. This is the type of community you want to join, where we come together multiple times each month, virtually and in person. We support each other, invest with each other, and even interview each other on our podcasts, and invite each other to speak at our live events. If you're ready to take your real estate investing to the next level, this is the group for you. Fill out an application today by following the link in the show notes.
Mr. Sterling White, I know you've been on the show before, but I'd really like to learn a little bit about a very creative deal that you've done. So question number 1, what's a really creative deal?
Oh, okay. I would say that very first deal was a very creative one for someone who's just looking to get started and not more of 100+ unit acquisition. So that very first one was no cash was out of my pocket and had no funds that were in my bank account, but was able to overcome that limiting belief and find someone to be able to put that deal together. Purchase price $25,000. They funded that, and then an additional $25,000 into it. For the renovations, rented it for $850, and then in exchange, I was able to get equity in that deal. I believe the split was majority, 85% went to them, and then 15% to me. So that was by far the most creative deal, because that allowed me to get my foot in the door in the industry, and then the rest just snowballed from there.
One thing that I'll point out is, I feel like I heard you say that 85% went to the other person, 15% went to you. Now, I'll say a couple of things. Number one, you could structure it any way. I mean, you could have said, look, I'm doing all the work. I get 90%, you get 10. That would have been fine. But I want to share with the listener that it doesn't matter how you structure it. If you want to give up 85% and take 15 for yourself, you've done your first deal. There's so many people that get so hung up on, no, I need at least 50. I need at least 90. I'm the one doing this. And what they end up doing is never going anywhere because they're so hung up on like some certain percentage. I've done deals where I've taken 15% as well in the beginning, and that allowed me to start doing deals. Start doing more deals, start getting a track record, start being more picky and choosy with the people that I work with. But no matter what it is for you, you need to find a way to start. And if it means that you got to give up 85% of the deal to the lender, then do it. Just get involved. There's a lot of people that have become extremely successful. Tim Bratz came on the podcast. He talked about how he gave 90% of his deals through the first several deals, and now he keeps 90%. So it's a huge thing. I mean, it's just a very subtle thing that we could skip through. But for the listener, if you're really wanting to get to the first level, just be okay with structuring the deal in the best way possible. The next question I wanted to know is just one book that you're reading recently that you really think that the listener's going to get some value at.
Okay. It's one that I'm reading right now. Love reading. It's called Compound Effect.
I love that.
By Darren Hardy. Yes, Darren Hardy. And he talks about habits and beliefs, and I'm getting new things. I'm getting new perspectives from that, because he talks about one habit that is a not so good one, that it seems like it's not too much of an effect right now, but compounding it over the years is when it completely could take you off path. But if you have the good habit that you're constantly doing over and over and over, it's the same thing. It's just reinforcing that thought and compounding on it.
Oh, perfect. Well, I know we've talked a little bit about where you were 5 years ago and where you'll be 5 years from now on the last podcast. That's episode 148. The listener's going to just hop in there and they're going to scroll through and just find episode 148 after this. Mm-hmm. So that's all good. But I know that the answers to how we give back, they change daily. And I know that your podcast is a way that you give back. But thinking about that question, what's the way that you feel like you're contributing most to other people right now?
I would say just being an ideal and a blueprint. So just a little bit about my upbringing. I had mentioned it previously, but didn't go so much into the trenches. Is single mother, fraternal twin. My fraternal twin ended up taking a not so good path and is facing a hard time due to that, unfortunately. And that's what many people take in the environment and upbringing I was in. So I want to be a example, or that's what I'm working towards, to be a blueprint. Hey, you don't have to take this path. Here's another, and this is exactly how I do it. So that's the message and the mission that I'm ultimately working towards, to give back to kids, because I feel that, I don't know if it was some higher being, spirituality, or whatever it was that decided to, I wouldn't say choose me, but I had a pivotal moment. I don't want to go too much. Okay, I'll go into the story just a little bit. But I was on the boat. I was at a college. This was a boathouse in the middle of the lake. Beaming question came down to me. I was going into Average-Land, I would say. Asked me, Sterling, is this what you want to do with your life? After that, took a completely different trajectory in life. And I feel that, I don't know if I was chosen to do that, but I feel of some sort I'm obligated, and that's why I want to do that.
That's really powerful. I like that. Interesting. Not everyone has an experience like that, but just being able to ask that question to yourself can really help a lot of people, especially if they grew up, depending on their mother, father situation and whatever neighborhood they grew up in. There's a lot of folks that I've met that have decided that the only path they have is some certain path because their dad was a doctor, so they have to be a doctor. But no matter where we started, whether it was in the slums or if your dad was a doctor or whatever, we have the ability to step back and say, is this the path that I want to choose? And if not, what path do I want to do? And I think that's really powerful.
And one thing I'm interested about is I am a believer, or I believe some sort, everyone has that voice. I just believe at that moment in time in my life, I was open to hearing it. I believe I've had several instances where it came to me, but at that moment I heard it and I took action on it. So it's very interesting. I don't want to get too much. I'm getting jazzed up again.
Awesome. Well, I only have one last question, but before I ask how people find you and get a hold of you, let's just remind the listener that your website is the Sonder Investment Group. That's each human being has their own life, their own story, their own value that they can give to you. And secondly, the podcast that you're going to be looking for after this one is the real estate experience. You're going to go and look to see how Adam Adams got hung up on that podcast, how he couldn't answer a question. You're going to be curious about that. So that's called the Real Estate Experience Podcast. That's actually Sterling White's podcast. And so now it's time for me to ask the final question to you. What's the single best way for the listener to find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say you can find me on, at sounderinvestmentgroup.com, and you can send me a message there, learn about what I'm doing, and also biggerpockets.com as well. Type in Sterling White to the search bar and then slide into the DM on that. And so I'm actually going to flip it around again, Adam. Hopefully I don't stump you again, but have you thought of that question yet?
Oh, have I thought of the question?
The absurd habit.
Very, I think I had many, but I thought that it had to be involving real estate. And so I was thinking, it's got to be a real estate habit. I have a lot of unique things. One is I stay up late at night all the time. One is that, I'm always thinking, my brain always wants to know how to go to the next level. It's difficult for me to turn that off. Some others is that I always have to kiss my kids goodbye. I don't know what it is, but it's just like, I know that there's some couples that they have to hug, they have to kiss or whatever. I feel like even if they're in the back seat and I'm dropping them off at school, I've got this thing where I'm like, give me a kiss, There's so many. I mean, I'm always on social media. It's a huge habit for me. It's out of the normal. I spend almost as much time on social media as what many people spend at their full-time job. And so I do feel like I've got tons of absurd habits, but the listener is going to want to go to sonderinvestmentgroup.com. So it's really easy. It's just the name of the company.com. Also, the real estate experience, it's nothing complicated. The real estate experience. And then if they go to just episode 148, it's another really great place. So that's how you can find Sterling. That's how you can see a little bit about what he's doing. The man is crushing it. And we'll definitely have you on the show again. I'm going to let you go. But until next time, my friend, think outside the box. As a reminder, any investment opportunities mentioned on this show are for accredited investors only. And if you're interested in working with me and my team, then go to realbluespruce.com and click Get on the List. It's that simple. Just click Get on the List to start passively investing. This has been an episode of the Apartment Investing Show with me, Adam Adams. All rights are reserved. And if you haven't done so already, then make sure that you absolutely smash that subscribe button. And I'll see you on the next episode.